Ian Hartitz. Welcome aboard, my friend.
Great day to be great, my friend. It's time number 5 or 6 with you. I'm losing count, but always a pleasure.
I don't know, man. I don't know. You're doing great. You're at Fantasy Life now. What are you doing for Fantasy Life?
All sorts of fun things, man. We got our newsletter, which goes out to over 400,000 loyal subscribers each
400,000?
In this economy, no less. It is free, though.
Shit.
Luckily, your boy writes the Tuesday and Friday editions after the prime time goodness. Plenty of articles, plenty of podcasts, the Fantasy Life podcast in the meantime. But yeah, man, fun time. Myself, Dwayne McFarland, Kendall Valenzuela, Peter Overset. Great crew there. And yeah, bringing everything to you at free $99. Gotta love it.
D. Wayne. Love D. Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
Pete. So, the helicopter, right? The chopper, right? Let's how you've had a couple good weeks. You've a bit of a run with the chopper, huh?
If you just ignore pretty much everything I did the previous 3 years and only focus on these last 2 weeks, man, things are going spectacular of late. So look, it's always been one of these things where we're trying to predict, blowups or maybe a bit of the lesser owned DFS guys out there. So playing a game that doesn't exactly lend itself to, that 50-50 record as it is. But yeah, man, got Tank Dell week 9, Bijan in week 10. Arthur Smith found a way to not even screw that one up. We shall see what happens with it, man. But you know what? Over the years, it was one of those things where I miss, month in a row, God knows, probably more at certain points. And just, would really be on the mind all day Sundays. But you know what? We got to go out there. We got to predict some things. We're fantasy analysts after all. What's the point if we're not going to put our neck on the line via, a big badass helicopter at least once a week? So doing great. And always happy to see those pilots get back home safely and get to return to their families.
But it's a harrowing mission because you are going against the wisdom of the crowds. You're going with the under-owned guys, the under-rostered guys in DFS. So it would make sense when you're going against literally everybody else, the entire community, you're not going to have a 50% record. Like, to me, a 25% hit rate would be a good hit rate.
Yeah. And I don't even think we're close to 25%, to be honest with you. So, hey, it's one of those things, man, where, in fantasy, hey, I'm hoping, man, 2024, maybe that's the year I get every last thing right. But, yeah, man, it's a tough game out here. So I just try to limit the amount of times that people can, say that I'm an idiot and don't know what I'm talking about before the actual outcome takes place. As long as we got that line of reasoning, okay, and we feel good about the process, we'll let the, football bounce the way it's going to go. It's like Norm Macdonald said back in the day, man, don't bet on football. Ball isn't even around.
That's a Normism I had not heard before.
It's a good one.
Don't bet on football. The ball's not round. That kind of makes a lot of sense, actually. There is a lot more randomness with football than other sports.
Russell Wilson getting bailed out by the 12th man again last night. Shout out Bob Condato for that joke.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. Your favorite helicopter pilot now at the Fantasy Life from Matthew Berry. Here with me today is a social media savant and one of the best fantasy analysts in the business. It is Ian Hartitz. Talk to me.
Hell of an intro, my brother.
Oh, that felt so good.
90s Bulls intros, man. Can't beat it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I feel good, man. It feels good. This is what you need. Week sweating. 11.
Ready to
this
run
is what you need.
wall.
I always tell people that, the player profile or team from November 1st to Thanksgiving is the hardest period to do this. Right? It's when people get disinterested in the waiver wire. Their teams are out of it. We haven't hit the fantasy playoffs yet. And then suddenly we have Thanksgiving, and we have the Thanksgiving games, and you're on vacation for a few days, some time off. Then all of a sudden you come back, and then the NFL is getting into playoff mode where there's now the playoff chase, and now you know who's out of it, who's in it, who's going for the number one pick, right? Who's going for a bye week. And then you have all the fantasy championship jockeying, all those final pickups to make a run. it starts to get interesting again because you get a lot of people super engaged with, hey, now it's time for me to go win this thing. But there are a few weeks and we're in the center. I mean, you and I right now at this moment are in the center of the doldrums of the fantasy season. I mean, this is the absolute. We are going to put the entire fantasy football community on our shoulders and carry them through this low point.
Hey, man, championships are earned. And I should say they're won in December, but they're earned in November. This is crunch time, man. We got to, try to figure out the best we can what from the last 10 weeks is actually real and what we should, actually think is maybe not, and accordingly adjust moving forward, man. So, yeah, it's crazy thinking, going back even 2 short months ago and seeing what we thought we knew was going to happen. Obviously, NFL is a way of making us feel rather stupid by the time 4 o'clock comes around each and every week. But I'm ready to go, man.
These are the dog days, and your energy is going to get us through them. And these NFL games, like perfectly timed, sweet slate of games in Week 10. How'd you like those games?
Coming off too, like we had the really fun just lineup, from 9:30 all the way to the 8:30 game pretty much on Week 9. Like, and that was just like really getting hyped up throughout the week. And I saw it all over, Twitter, just in terms of like Week 10 on paper did not look like a good week at all. But you said it, man. My goodness. 6 game-winning field goals as time expired. The previous NFL record in a single week was 3 of them. So high-scoring games. I mean, look, just the Browns, Ravens, Lions, and Chargers, like, it was a lot of offenses finally performing like we kind of thought and hoped that they would all season long. And then even having, again, just, some dominant individual performances along the way. Fun slate, man. And again, just goes to show you that, kind of looking at some of these slates on paper reminds me of, I'm a big UFC fan. And sometimes the worst looking cards you think wind up actually being the best ones when you finally let the games actually play out.
But there were some bad performances. At what point do you stick a fork in Jeudy, drop him, it's over?
Hard to drop him in a lot of these leagues. Like, let's just face it, even if we're never starting him, he's still going to fall kind of into that wide receiver 4 range of things at worst. But it sucks, man. And seeing now that Marvin Mims is actually taken away from Judy and the Broncos might just be maneuvering towards this 2 tight end offense without even Greg Dulcich in the picture just yet. Like, that is the problem. So kudos to Cortland Sutton, man, because I know last year it was way more perceived as this 1A, 1B situation. But, either way you wanted to go with Sutton and Judy. And really, we all kind of gave Judy, or at least, I gave him the benefit of the doubt over Sutton coming into this year. And there was, reason for that over the past 6-7 weeks of 2022. Judy was popping as a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy land, but clearly hasn't quite persisted into this season. So I was hopeful, man, like following the bye week, because Lord knows Judy's name has been in trade rumors just forever. So maybe the fact that he was staying in Denver and they just had another week to hopefully get him chilled out and back into the offense, was hoping that would happen, but not quite looking like the case. So kudos to Sean Payton. I mean, really for turning this Broncos team around ever since that complete debacle against the Dolphins. But in terms of Judy, expecting much more in this passing game, man, not for this year.
It's the Cortland Sutton show, man. Cortland Sutton's the alpha. He is discount DK Metcalf. He's been that all along. I'm so happy for him. I've been a Cortland Sutton fan. I like players that look like Cortland Sutton. 6'4", athletic, can go up and get it, versatile. It was unclear why he wasn't more productive last year, why he wasn't productive to start the season, but he's starting finally after a year and a half to develop rapport with Russell Wilson. You love to see it. Rest of season, okay? If everyone that you love was kidnapped and you had and this was for everybody. This is for everybody's safety. You had to pick correctly, okay? Rest of season fantasy points, Jerry Jeudy or Michael Wilson.
Oh.
Who you got?
Oh, my goodness.
This is what I'm talking about. Because Michael Wilson, okay, if you're not dropping Jerry Jeudy, Michael Wilson's 12% rostered.
He was about 3 feet away from scoring. Would have been a really cool touchdown last week, by the way. But when you get the 1 yard line, you gotta get Clayton Tune involved and get that QB.
you gotta get Clayton Tune involved.
Oh my goodness, man! I'm going to go with Judy, but it's literally like if they were right next to each other in the rest of the season ranks, like I think it'd be reasonable. Which honestly,
right.
that just go ahead and I was talking on the podcast with Dwayne last Sunday night about, and he just said like, is Sam Howell just straight up better than Trevor Lawrence right now? And I was like, when you bring in the sack element of things and stuff, I think you can probably still lean towards Lawrence there. But I was like, the fact it's even a discussion between these two guys right now kind of tells you the real story, regardless of who you want to pick.
Yeah, and certainly in Dynasty, you'd rather have Michael Wilson for sure. Mac Jones. Oh, Mac Jones. So, yeah, there was great games this weekend, but I'm starting with some disappointing performances because that's what's more fun to talk about. If you were looking at all the quarterbacks around the league, you would rank Mac Jones as quarterback what?
25 feels high. He'd be between 25 and 29, I think.
I think 25 is a compliment to him. I don't know how you'd get to 25. I think if we went through all the quarterbacks, you'd find yourself having Mac Jones lower. Mac Jones' destiny is going to be one of the higher end backup quarterbacks in the league, like Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton. These are backup quarterbacks that everyone is happy to have because if you actually look down the roster in Los Angeles, for example, with the Chargers, they don't have a backup quarterback that they trust. I would trust an Andy Dalton to run my offense. Andy Dalton at one point in time was a top 5 fantasy quarterback with A.J. Green.
The Red Rocket.
Yeah, Mac Jones is his future is to be the next Andy Dalton. That's what he is going to be. But sooner rather than later. Andy Dalton had a much longer run in the league as a starter. Mac Jones will not have that.
But here's the thing. Why was Andy Dalton able to be a successful starter? Because those mid-2010s Bengals teams were absolutely loaded. A.J. Green, Mohamed Sanu, Marvin Jones, Gio Bernard, Jeremy Hill, Tyler Eifert. I mean, they had weapons everywhere. Like every single one of those players I just named, I think is a better pass game option than anything.
TJ Hushmanzada.
Right now. So, look, I'm not trying to be a Mac Jones apologist. Like he is absolutely a sum of his parts quarterback, but the parts right now are admittingly terrible, man. Like when we're arguing between Juju Smith-Schuster or Demario Douglas being your number one wide receiver in the year 2023, that is not good. So I've really liked Mike Gesicki for a long time, but when he is actually like, if we had to sit down and say like, who's your most explosive option on the Patriots offense, like it's probably him right now. So Lord knows, I mean, even when Gesicki is open, we all saw that, sad excuse for an interception he tossed to get himself benched over there in Germany. So again, Mac Jones, number one in the NFL in turnover-worthy plays per PFF. It is not just the guys around him, but on the same side of things, like we came into this year and the entire thesis behind expecting a bounce back was going from Matt Patricia to Bill O'Brien. And I think it's a good example, man, of the Jims and Joes having a bit more to do than the X's and O's, at least in New England. So that's the thing with Mac. And it's the thing with, honestly, Bryce Young this year. Like it just sucks when we have to throw, you can argue that, better quarterbacks would overcome these terrible situations, but I hate when you have any of these quarterbacks on a rookie deal, which should be the time that you're able to surround them with higher end pieces all around. I mean, look at DJ Moore, the Bears, Diggs to the Bills, Hopkins to the Cardinals. A lot of these teams have tried to give their young quarterbacks number one receivers, but you have situations like Mac Jones and, like Bryce Young this year, with all due respect to what Adam Thielen's doing, where you more or less just have to throw out the season like the Bears did last year. So again, I don't even think we've seen enough flashes from Jones to say that with these better weapons, he'd be that much better of a quarterback. But just from a team building perspective, man, I don't think there's too many quarterbacks you could drop in this Patriots offense and expect that much better results anyway.
I think we could expect more from Malik Cunningham. I was intrigued
by
Bill Belichick creating these packages for Malik Cunningham. I was like, this is a good idea. This is interesting. This is him turning back the clock. He's getting creative. And then what do? They cut him. They put him on the practice squad. And then they elevate Bailey Zappi when they bench Mac Jones, just wiping any potential of creativity away whatsoever. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's what you want. Okay, how they've handled Malik Cunningham or mishandled him, really, that was the last straw for me. Like, can we just please move on as quick as possible? When do you believe Bill Belichick will be fired?
I don't think he'll ever be fired. I think he'll walk out the door before that happens. But it is interesting, man, because you can talk that, okay, he just doesn't have a quarterback, but like how bad his defense has been this year too, man. Like that's where you really see he's lost his fastball. So I know they were fine against the Colts on that side of thing, but my God, man, because at least over these last couple years, you know, even without Brady, like the Patriots were still competitive year in and year out. I mean, you would have thought your kind of floor for these Belichick teams would kind of be like what Tomlin's doing in Pittsburgh, just winning gross games, but no offense, not a real contender, but still a football team that can go out there more weeks than not and, you know, do the damn thing, at least on defense. But even that since the Cowboys game, where admittedly, you know, they lost some players, but man, you start seeing one cornerback after another being disciplined for these team reasons. And it just doesn't seem like a very fun team to be around at the moment, man. So I don't think he gets fired. I mean, remember this last week, we had the whole Robert Kraft talking to the team before the game storyline, but a couple of weeks ago was a storyline where Belichick had just signed a fairly long-term extension before the season. They just didn't really make a big thing about it. So should they move on? You know, that's a different conversation. Will they? I don't think so.
I can't believe I mean, as bad as fantasy gamers are worshiping these coaches, some of these owners are just as bad, not realizing. I mean, I mentioned it on the waiver wire program, but do you remember the case against Dak was he was losing Kellen Moore?
Yeah.
Remember that? Remember that storyline? Remember that it was really, you can't lose Kellen Moore.
That was a wild
how is he gonna allow CeeDee Lamb to break records? He can't put CeeDee Lamb in a position to break records if he doesn't have Kellen Moore. My God. Yeah, it turns out time and time. Just wait, Ian. Just wait. Bill Belichick was the last one, right? He was the last unassailable coach. Every coach before him and every coach after him has been humbled by losses and the revelations that, actually, they're not the reason for the performances. It's actually the players.
Yeah.
Just wait until it happens to one Mike McDaniel. Okay, so Mike McDaniel is now the new guy, right? There's always a new guy. There's always a coach to step into the void for the writers to write about and for everyone to follow themselves and how much they love this guy and please never change. And you're bringing in a whole new attitude of coach, a whole new type of culture. Remember, it was McVay before it wasn't. So it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not even be next year, but we're eventually going to have this reckoning with Mike McDaniel as well. Just wait for it to happen. The one guy of all these guys that is rarely discussed with these narratives around, you know, the genius of the coaches is the guy that's been the most consistent, and that's John Harbaugh. I mean,
former special teams coordinator.
I mean, why not, man? I mean, look at the Ravens. Would you agree they're just simply a better team than the Bengals right now?
Better team, yes, but as we know, you know, what's the easiest way to beat the better team is to have the, better overall quarterback in one game. And as much as I am a Lamar Jackson apologist, like just this healthy version of Joe Burrow, man, I think it's right up there, probably only behind Patrick Mahomes, with all due respect to Hurts and Josh Allen amongst the other guys out there. So, man, like straight up, like neutral field, Ravens versus the Bengals. Like I would understand if the Ravens were 1.5, 2-point favorites, but I think I picked the Bengals, man. Like I think
this week they're playing, right?
Yeah, what's the line?
And this week it's Ravens at home, but it's -3.5.
Okay, so neutral field, we're talking about 2 points.
We're talking about the bookmakers believe the Ravens are a slightly better team, and that's just because the Cincinnati defense is too much of a liability. But that's what you talked about with Bill Belichick losing his fastball. John Harbaugh, year in, year out, you know that this defense is going to be able to stop people most of the time. Yeah. That they're going to have playmakers at every level, and that's, you know. And look at Keaton Mitchell. He's a playmaker at running back. They find a way, somehow, some way, to acquire playmakers that are going to make a difference on both offense and defense. And now Keaton Mitchell only getting the 3 carries, right? But he got the touchdown. Like the usage wasn't strong necessarily. and that may, convince some people maybe to sell high in Dynasty, for example. I would be very careful selling high on this guy, where all he has now between him and a monster role is Gus Edwards. I love Gus Edwards is such a great story. Gus the Bus coming back from a multi-year injury, but I could also see Keaton Mitchell being like a Dion Lewis in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, because I think his most, realistic way to getting more usage is not so much bumping Gus out of the door. It's just getting Justice Hill out of the picture, who's been far less efficient than Keaton, because everyone's been less efficient than Keaton in the NFL this season. But then with Gus, still doing his thing near the goal line. I mean, dude, 7 touchdowns over the last 4 weeks. Gus Edwards is the RB4 in full PPR scoring over the last month of action. Absolute madness. So yes, that is a fact.
He's the RB4?
Last 4 games, he is the RB4. A little bit of bye week fuckery going on there, but not that much. More guys than not have been able to play 4 games. So, again, it's mostly because of those touchdowns, but, also had that 80-yard catch. He had a really big run, last week. I know he got shut down against Cleveland, but everyone gets shut down against Cleveland unless you're Keaton Mitchell. So I do think that's going to be more of a two-headed backfield with Justice. Again, hopefully resuming more of that 5-10% snap per game role that he honestly usually had when one J.K. Dobbins was healthy. So, yeah, man. And then guess what? We got to eventually give some credit to Lamar Jackson for all this going on as well, because it has been one running back after another since he's been there, absolutely ball out. And, it's not surprising when you go ahead and look at the Ravens' top 2 offense in terms of yards before contact per carry. Every single year, Lamar Jackson has been at QB. So that's kind of the, double-edged sword, man. It's something we, talked about, I think, with, at length with Buffalo and the Eagles now with Jalen Hurts. Like, you have these dual threat QBs who certainly make the run game a lot better. You got to account for that quarterback is going to widen the rushing lanes and all that. But is that, increase in yards per carry going to make up for the same factors impacting Gus and Keaton? Not much of a pass game role because the quarterback's scrambling instead of checking down. And Lamar still very much the number 1 rushing quarterback in football. Certainly eating into that, goal line rushing pie far more than like a Jared Goff or someone like that in a different offense. So I'm with you, man. I like Mitchell. I think this week he could boom on Thursday night. I mean, you mentioned the Bengals. Like, pick any advanced rushing defense metric you want. You're going to see them near the bottom. So, that's great. But like, for me, and I wasn't as high on Devin Achane as I guess I should have been, which was like top 5 freaking running back in fantasy. But like, for you, man, because with Mitchell, all those nice things being said, I don't know that he's going to consistently see more than 10 to 12 carries or targets per game moving forward. And because of that, it's going to be tough for me to make him this, weekly must-start RB1, even though I realize, man, just 1 touch and he's, could be gone.
Well, that's why I compared him to Dion Lewis. When Dion Lewis was with the Patriots, he was doing it more with rushing efficiency than with pass catching. He's a great pass catcher, but they always had other pass catchers around. They always had a Kevin Falk. They always had a James White. Okay. So it was really the rushing efficiency that Dion Lewis was bringing to the table, and that's what Keaton Mitchell's doing. And do you know the original running back, the original Gus Edwards?
You calling LeGarrette Blount? That's too soon to be original.
Alfred Morris.
Oh, big Alf.
He was Alfred Morris. That's why we call it the Alfred Morris corollary. I coined that term, the Alfred Morris corollary, that these mobile quarterbacks, they're responsible for like an additional half yard of yards per carry, a 0.5 yards per carry bump. If they're freezing those linebackers and they're widening those running lanes, that's what Lamar Jackson brings to the table. And if you are a pure runner, and this is why it's a shame that J.K. Dobbins is not there, because J.K. Dobbins was set to benefit from this very much. But it happens to be Gus Edwards, and he's also doing a great job, right? But those 80-yard runs are not available to people that are working with pocket passers and below average offensive lines. So it's running back is part of a larger unit, and if you have a good to great offensive line with a mobile quarterback, anybody, including Zach Moss, can break off an 80-yard run. That's just a function of the offense, not necessarily what the running back is able to do. Just if you're J.K. Dobbins and you also run a 4.4, how many 80-yard runs would he have been able to put up this year? We can only imagine. That's the unfortunate thing.
It would have been like Dobbins would have been like the 2022 version of Miles Sanders, but like actually good on top of having, all these just huge gaping holes in a high scoring offense. But how does Keaton Mitchell go undrafted? How does Isaiah Pacheco go in the 7th round? How does Devin Achane end up going in round 3? Like, is all it takes now to be just this fancy game breaking running back a 4.3 40? Because at this point, man, like, again, I've gone through every single offseason. I try to do like some draft capital stuff. And I know like I'm not quite in the weeds as much as, you and some of the Dynasty community with that. So I'm not trying to be, Mr. Draft capital slave and all that. But, the numbers are out there. And for the longest time, man, it was like, yeah, who could be this year's James Robinson? It was more like who should be this decade's James Robinson? Because that's how rare it is to see these undrafted, these super late round guys truly not only just ball out as rookies, especially that, but even over the course of their career, man. So do you think like now more than ever at running back, it's time like to really throw away any semblances of that draft capital? Because again, someone like Keaton Mitchell a couple years ago, I just would have been like, look at the track record of running backs this small that don't have any draft capital, and it's a bunch of nobodies. But, by that, using that logic here, I would have missed out on Mitchell, and I was lucky enough to get some Achane because he was round 3. But if he had gone round 4, I wouldn't have been nearly as invested in him.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top of our Dynasty rankings, it's all players that were drafted in the 1st or 2nd round within the first 40 picks.
Yeah.
Right? The latest drafted player in our top 6 is Jonathan Taylor. Right? And now you look up and Jonathan Taylor, like with Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins, what could have been if we could have seen those running backs enjoying the Alfred Morris corollary with Anthony Richardson and Lamar Jackson? It's a total shame for this season, but we still have Jonathan Taylor healthy. And if you look at his schedule to close out the season, Josh Larkey thinks he could be a league winner.
I can see it, man. Buccaneers, Titans, Bengals, Steelers, Falcons, Raiders. It's not like every one of those is a complete layup, or you're going to be hard-pressed to find too many better schedules out there. Even the Titans, man, like I know especially to start the season and in past years, it's been a defense that's been so tough against running backs. But you look up, man, in 4 of the last 5 games, buck 39 or more allowed on the ground. And let's face it, based on what we've seen from Levis over the past 2 weeks, not so sure they're going to be overly competitive there in a few more weeks of action as well. So, yeah, man, that's there for him. And guess what? Even just regardless of the matchups, it's Jonathan fucking Taylor actually in the Zach Moss role, which I never thought I would have to be saying out loud. But here we are, man. Like JT throughout his entire career, even when he's going off in 2021, we still had Nyheim Hines, like, not stealing away too much. JT was just fine. But it wasn't this every down CMC-esque 90% snap role until we finally saw that last week in Germany, man. So coming out of the bye, all wheels up for JT, top 5 running back the rest of the way. It wouldn't surprise me if he is the RB1.
Did you trade for any Michael Pittman?
I didn't trade for much of him. I actually drafted a good bit of them just because it was one of those situations where you kind of looked around the ADP boards and it was like, well, you have, who was the guy? It was Pitt. Yeah, I had a hard time with Pittman because he was going so much cheaper than someone like Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore. That was the example I was looking for. I called Michael Pittman, I think, like arbitrage DJ Moore because Pittman had actually outscored him in each of the past 2 seasons. And it was like Pittman was the only guy that was really being penalized for having this, probably erratic run first quarterback compared to someone like DJ Moore, obviously playing with Justin Fields. So been there, now leads the NFL in games with 8+ receptions. So he's kind of like that SpongeBob meme where he's looking, real scrawny and shribbly. Like that's Michael Pittman in standard leagues. But if you're in PPR, man, dude is absolutely crushing it for you. So shout out to this Colts offense, though. I mean, okay, last week, 10 points in Germany. Like that wasn't ideal. But they're still, man, overall 9th in points per game this year, despite losing Richardson. I mean, I know we're talking about our Jims and Joes and everything. We can give a little bit of credit to Minshew. I think more credit to that offensive line for having a nice rebound year. But Shane Steichen over there in Indy, man, definitely turning that team around for the better so far.
And the Lions offense has been as advertised. Typically, you get this much hype. It's impossible for a unit to deliver. They've delivered, baby. They've delivered. Jahmyr Gibbs, 3 straight top 3 performances. Get the Bears this week.
Whew.
But looking at the ownership projections, potential chopper for maybe David Montgomery. You think David Montgomery might be a better DFS play than Gibbs?
Probably. I mean, I definitely, after last week, like you have to rank and project Gibbs for more. But again, trying to play off the ownership percentages, I can certainly see the route for Montgomery. Obviously, having that revenge game factor's got to feel good in there with that one.
It's exciting.
Just what we got to realize now is, hey, at this point in time, the Lions, I think they're implied for the second or third most points of the week, just like they are most weeks. I mean, just looking at this matchup as a home, I haven't seen the spreads yet, but I'm assuming they're favored by well over a touchdown. Like just that sort of game script alone should be enough for Montgomery. So I know some people will look at the Bears rushing defense actually being pretty damn good this year. You know, added Montez Sweat recently, but are they really that good, or can teams just throw the ball all they want against them and accordingly don't even need to overly worry about the run? Regardless, guess what? I think the Lions are probably good enough to run on just about anyone. So yeah, man, like that call, but we just need to realize, I think what we're seeing now out of Montgomery is going to be much closer to 2022 Jamal Williams. Like, I know everyone was saying like this is this year's Jamal Williams when Montgomery was going off over those first 3-4 weeks, but that wasn't the case, man. That was way more like 2021 James Conner, where we actually saw the starter, you know, in that case, it was Chase Edmonds. In this case, it was Jahmyr Gibbs. But we were seeing Montgomery and previously James Conner take the every down role. I mean, Montgomery was over 70% of those snaps in 3 of his first 4 games of the season. We only saw Jamal Williams eclipse 50% snaps one time all of last year. Like, it was much more of a split backfield, which is now what we saw in week 10. So guess what? Like, this is fine. The Lions last year were one of only 2 offenses to enable multiple top 24 PPR running backs per game. Right now, both Gibbs and Montgomery are top 12. That would be the first backfield to pull that off in one season since 2017, Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. So I think they can get there with the offense. And, you know, hey, maybe the real move here, man, is to put them both in the lineup. Sure enough, it worked last week.
It did. So they're 10-point favorites at home.
Yeah.
It's a 47-point total, 28 implied points for the Lions. We're looking at 4 touchdowns for the Lions. Montgomery's going to get at least 1. I can tell you that right now. He could get 3.
Could get 4. Who knows?
Yeah, you could get 4. Oh my God, it'd be great. But where should we have Jahmyr Gibbs ranked in Dynasty? Should you push him all the way up to 2 or not quite?
I mean, it's hard to argue with anything at the profile. I mean, he's been fantastic efficiency-wise in this freaking offense that is more fantasy-friendly than any other one. Yeah, put him 2. Why not, man? At this point, would you take Gibbs or Bijan?
I would rather have Bijan, but I'd also rather have Breece Hall. I think I got to put Breece Hall ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs, and then there's that tier where you have the past the age apex running back in Christian McCaffrey. You have the guy that's at the age apex in Jonathan Taylor, and you have the pre-age apex Jahmyr Gibbs. So pre, at, and post, all with almost the exact same lifetime value rating on our Dynasty rankings. It's fascinating. It really depends on your build. If we have a strategy mode where if you switch it over into rebuild mode, boom, Gibbs becomes the RB3. If you put it in win now mode, he drops down to RB6. But in neutral mode, he's right there, RB3, 4, 5.
I just don't see at this point, in full PPR scoring especially, like, I don't think Gibbs is dropping out of the position's top 12 for the next 4+ years. And like with those other guys, even someone like Hall, I mean, already coming off one major surgery, I feel less good about the Jets' overall offensive prospects moving forward versus Gibbs. So who's the better, if we're drafting a team to play the Aliens tomorrow, who do I want at running back? Yeah, I'll take Breece Hall over Jahmyr Gibbs there. But I do think just, again, maybe having that extra, 5th year on the first round rookie deal, making sure he is going to be back there in Detroit, enough of an edge for me to probably put Gibbs number 2.
That's certainty where you've got Gibbs for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Whereas Hall could be looking for another team in just 2 years. And even if he's not looking for another team, there could be all this tumultuous contract talk. Yeah. And like we saw with Jonathan Taylor, suddenly Breece Hall isn't playing for the first 5 weeks of the season.
Who knows, man?
That's part of the equation, man. That's going to be a bigger part of the equation, maybe than even we have it. Like, this is a learning moment for us.
Could be.
Devon Achane. Devon Achane, real shame. I wish, God, man, I want to see Devon Achane at home against the Raiders, but
I mean, he could be back. Are you saying he's for sure not going to play?
I don't see it. Every time I think a guy's going to be back, they've been, when is Khalil Herbert going to be back, right? All these guys, they end up taking a week or two longer than anyone thinks to come back because the problem is the coaches set unrealistic expectations from the beginning. So do I really want to see him against the Raiders? Yes, but I am just tempering expectations, but it could happen.
Do you think we see what they honestly did his first game of the season in week 2? Like he comes in, but more so it's just like this pure kind of, number 2, number 3, like distant option? Or do you think when he's ready to go, he's ready to go? Because, I mean, that's the thing. Like he broke on the scene in week 3, obviously, but he had 8% snaps in week 2. We also saw when Jeff Wilson came back, it was more so in that, emergency only type of role. So I don't know. I mean, it was nice hearing Mike McDaniel say they were just being cautious. He probably could have played with a brace on, but I don't know. Shout out to Coach Speak Index for trying
with a brace. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Here, I just Googled Devon Achane. You want to hear the headlines? You ready for this? This is classic. This is classic. This dude's not fucking playing this week. Ready for this?
Yeah.
Ready for this? Miami Dolphins RB Devon Achane return coming soon, but how soon?
Say no more. Say no more.
You have no idea. And they just were talking about him wearing a brace. So probably not. Okay. They have Jeff Wilson back, right? I never know. Has Jeff Wilson gone back to the IR? I can never tell. I always, whenever I say, hey, Jeff Wilson's going to play, I'm like, maybe.
Do we think Achane, when he's back, is even going to be like, because here's the thing. If he is, there are not many players out there like Deebo Samuel's another one. Like certain players, they need to be at 100% because Lord knows if they're not, like their role just isn't big enough to really give us the expectations for
Thank
that.
You.
know,
this is part of the reason why these are highly tuned race cars. People like Devon Achane, 190 pounds. You cannot put him out there unless 100%. That is malpractice.
And like, look, we're talking about a guy where goes freaking nuclear against the Broncos. And after that, man, he has one of the best games that we've seen from a running back, like truly ever, like film numbers, whatever you want to cite. Like that was unreal. Next 2 weeks, he had 11 and 12 touches. So yeah, guess what, guys? If he's going to keep going out there and average an NFL record 12 yards per carry, nothing is going to matter. I get it. But you'd like to think at some point it's going to come back down to earth. And, I don't even think it's going to have to be natural regression happening here. Probably just the injury is going to sap that. And honestly, man, this Dolphins run game as a whole, Mostert hasn't quite been that same monster in recent weeks. As much as, we do love, to crown Mike McDaniel, as you were talking about earlier.
It's almost like the schedule got harder. It's weird how that happens where when you're playing the Broncos and the Panthers, everything looks easy. And then when you're not, it's not.
Are we talking about the Dolphins or the Cowboys now?
I'm talking about the Dolphins. Did you see who they played to start the season? They didn't play anybody. They didn't play, and they didn't have a win against a good team.
It's like week 9
last
year was the last one.
And now Devon Achane's not coming back this week. I can tell you that right now for all the reasons we just talked about. Then in week 12, they face the Jets. So at what point is he going to be fully reacclimated and 100%? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, week 13, week 14. At what point do you not use this practice window that's opened up where he's now been activated from IR? He has 3 weeks. They have 3 weeks to get him active. But then you go down the schedule, and it's like, at what point is he going to have another breakout game? You have to go all the way down, Dolphins at home, week 14?
No, I mean, Titans at home? Yeah, Titans at home. I mean, yeah, probably.
Right? They face the Titans at home, week 14.
Washington. Okay, so, yeah, assuming he's out this week. I think what we would hope for is...
You're just looking at him for the playoffs and hoping.
You want to claim week 12, but we're not going to feel good about starting him against the Jets. Like, we're just not in New York. And that's even a Friday.
They play the Jets again in week 15.
They're doing a Friday game on Black Friday. That's interesting. So yeah, but again, so we're not going to be able to start him like his first game back with all that much confidence. So to your point, the earliest is week 13. More likely is going to be week 14, week 15. Not ideal.
Trade him. In seasonal leagues, just trade him before the deadline. This is a trade deadline deal that you need to make. If you've been stashing him on IR, he's activated. Now is the time.
Yeah,
now there's a hope. There's a hope that he could play against the Raiders. He could get 3 carries against the Raiders.
Oh, my goodness.
See where I'm going with this?
I like that call. Yeah.
See where I'm going? Then they week 16, they face the Cowboys.
The real breakout.
They could be down in that game. Fantasy football championship week. They're at the Ravens.
The real breakout this week is Jalen Waddle. I'm with you there.
And this is a sell window for Devon A-Chain.
And buy Waddle, yeah?
Yeah. For all the same reasons that their running game is not going to be as available for these efficient runs. That means more passing. Ideally, some of these are shootouts, even if they're going against disruptive front sevens. Now, did you know Rachaad White is the RB8, a fraction of a point ahead of Bijan Robinson?
I did not know until you told me, but I did know he's ripped off, those 4 straight RB1 finishes. So he is on fire, man. And it's really, hey, you can go back and look at all my takes. Certainly not all of them are right, but it does go back to one of the main points, I think, in the offseason of like when you have the dead zone running back, just the guy that you don't think is going to be very efficient. You don't think the offense is going to be good, but oh my God, that projected volume. You wait. You take the James Conner. You take the Rachaad White. If you're going to take that archetype, you take him in round 7 or round 8. You don't draft Najee Harris out of premium. You don't draft Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, these guys out of premiums. If you are going to dive into that, you're going to go ahead and take the cheapest one possible. So credit to Rachaad White for really flashing as a receiver. I mean, I don't fully agree with every single ranking in the, ESPN's new kind of advanced, just like receiver score. But I appreciate, the process. And I think with any of these things, it's one extra data point to help us make our argument. So I'm not trying to slander them or anything, but you look at it, man, and Rachaad White is the number 1 receiving running back this year. And even if you want to say like, oh shit, that should be McCaffrey, watch him out there, man. I don't think you can name, 5 guys that have been better on the season. I know that really was the one thing last year that we could really lean on, despite how bad a lot of the rushing stuff was. So, early on wasn't always Baker Mayfield exactly trying to check it down, but as they've increased that volume a lot through the screen game, man, he's been making plays out there. And I believe he's forced more missed tackles as a receiver than any other pass catcher this year. So again, passing the eye test, man, as a receiver, the Buccaneers' Les Bake experience has been a little bit better than expected. And accordingly, man, he is, to your point, outperforming Bijan. Funny how, that sweet volume can help overcome a talent deficiency awfully quick.
Would you agree the top 5 pass catching running backs are in some order: Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, DeAndre Swift, Rachaad White?
Get Eckler in there.
So it's
CMC,
difficult. It's difficult
Hall,
to put
Eckler, White.
It's difficult to put Eckler in there. I will put Eckler in there, but it's those 6 guys. That was the other guy. Then Barkley is an option.
I don't know that Breece is like this unbelievable receiver. I think he's unbelievable with the football in his hands, but like I know he's caught a couple of wheels before, but like I don't see Breece going out there and making the types of consistent moves some of these other guys. All due respect, of course, but if we're going top 5, that would be the guy. Is it possible?
Okay, so that's the mix of guys. We could identify 6 to 7 guys. You want to put Barkley in there. Barkley's been just doomed by his supporting cast. Call it 7 guys. Kamara, on the tail end of his career, right? So let's put Kamara in there too. We get 8 guys, right? We're 8 guys. We're mixing them all up, trying to rank them, figure it out. I think White has to be in your top 3. I think of those guys, you're creating a top 3. I think you go McCaffrey. I think you go White, and then, like you said, no Breece Hall.
If we're doing this year, like
seen
it's not
enough
even a
from Jahmyr
conversation.
Gibbs yet.
it's not even a conversation if it's just this year. Now, if someone wants to say, let's look at the player, like, who, if we're ranking these guys in terms of what they can do in a neutral offense tomorrow, and you want to, side with Kamara's historical production stuff, okay, fine. But just in terms of weeks 1 through 10, 2023, man, it's not even close. And honestly, like, he is certainly more on the, younger, fresher side than a lot of those guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if this sticks in a little bit longer. I mean, if we look at Rachaad White right now, and let's say, I know the Buccaneers, at 4-5, they're probably not going to be in the running for, one of these top quarterbacks. Maybe they pull a Panthers and they try to make one of these trades and they get up. You put Drake May in this Tampa Bay offense and nothing else changes for White in terms of his usage and everything. Like, that's when we stop fucking around with the, borderline RB1 rankings and the dude becomes a top 5 running back.
Yeah. The 2 guys that I've listed in that the 8 guys we talked about, okay? Saquon Barkley looks like a running back. I know you mentioned Austin Eckler, but to me, he looks like a running back.
Yeah.
Right? He looks like a running back. The 2 guys that look like receivers are Rachaad White and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
They look like receivers. So I might say it's McCaffrey, White, Gibbs. If I had to pick, my top 3 receiving running backs, that sounds like that's a strong list that passes the advanced metrics test and that passes the eye test.
I'm not going to argue with that. Again, I think the other guys, if we look at more than just 2023 a little bit, they've also been each respectively banged up a little bit. If you do that process, then maybe not. But hey, this year, man, he's earned it. I'm with you. It's been one week after another. Still can't run the ball to save their freaking life in Tampa Bay. And it's not just White. It was, Lenny last year. It's every other running back they tried to put in there. So I'm not, slandering them for that. But my God, man, get a legit quarterback in there.
Even if Rachaad White is just an average runner, let's say he's an average runner and a phenomenal receiver, that's
fine.
An incredibly valuable asset for fantasy football.
I mean, like, yards per carry is probably the most overrated statistic for looking at, these running backs. I remember with Jonathan Taylor's 2021 season. Now, I took him from 5.5 yards per carry, best in the league, to I just put him down at 3.5 and, like, making him like one of the worst running backs in the league. I didn't change the touchdowns and stuff, so I know it's not a complete, 1-for-1 example of how it goes, but he literally went from like the overall RB1 to like the overall RB5. Like, again, just going from the most efficient running back in the league to one of the least ones. If you got that volume and you got a chance of scoring some touchdowns, which again, for White, it's been there actually recently with Baker doing, not completely terrible out there. Yeah, man, it's working in a major way.
It is. Looking at the second round, you mentioned Marvin Mims. He's finally starting to command some targets. It's nice. You saw Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed looked like the best receiver on the field for the Packers last week.
Yeah. Looked really good.
Who's your favorite second-round receiver from the draft?
Rice's owl. I think Rice has flashed the most with the football in his hands.
Okay, and I think Rashee Rice is a great pick. It's not. Can we just agree that this question really is about? It's not Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah.
That really is what this question is getting at.
It was all there. It was all there for him too, man. Like, you cannot write an easier situation for him. Like, even it's almost like Pickens last season. Not to, say, I understand Minko's been far less productive, and he's not nearly as good as George Pickens. But like, when you look at Pickens disappointing last season, it's like, oh, okay, he's got this role to start. And then they trade Claypool. Like, if you just knew those things were going to happen, we would have jumped all over this guy. Just like with Mingo, if we just knew, like, oh yeah, that Terrace Marshall guy you're slightly worried about, gone out of the picture. Like, Mingo is for sure going to be this weekly starting receiver in an offense. And oh yeah, guess what? DJ Chark is going to be injured as well. Nothing. Not even like really flashing out there either, man. That's been the shitty part. Like, we've seen plenty of receivers get undone.
He couldn't separate in college. So why was he going to start to be able to get separation in the pros? Doesn't make sense.
Big, fast, strong, has a couple splash games here and there, man. Nah.
Nonsense. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. He should have been a third-round pick at best, right? Nico Collins, draft, capital zone. That's really what he deserved. The early second round was absurd. But we typically don't get more than one hit out of the third round at the wide receiver position. Yeah. This year, it's looking like 3. Josh Downs,
Yeah.
Tank Dell, Michael Wilson. If you had to rank those guys, if you're ranking those three receivers, how do you have them ranked?
Dell 1. He looks like the engine of this Texans passing game. I mean, no Nico. They put Noah Brown. Shout out Noah Brown, man. Second most receiving yards in the NFL last 3 weeks. Just
Don't overthink it, man. Pick him up.
baffles me. I love him, man. OHIO. Like, he's had it in him this whole time. But like, my goodness, just still wild to see. So I'm gonna go Tank number 1. You really like Michael Wilson, don't you? You keep trying to jam this dude going.
Just watch.
I'm going to go Tank 1, Josh Downs number 2, but I appreciate the effort of Michael Wilson. I would
Michael
love
Wilson is a true alpha receiver. He's the next Michael Pittman. That's what he is.
I like that comp. And he does move a lot better for a big man. I mean, that yak he had last week, I know he didn't score. He was ruled down just short, but like seeing him move like that with the football in his hands really impressed me. I know he hasn't been a high-end target earner throughout a lot of his career, but to see him go right in there, completely just earn that starting spot from day one. Rave reviews from training camp. We've seen the flashes out there. I certainly get it from the guy. I mean, if you were going to say, who do I want, starting tomorrow, Jonathan Mingo or Michael Wilson, it's Michael Wilson by a fucking landslide. So
that's it. And you'd take Michael Wilson over Quentin Johnston.
Ooh, yeah, but at least Johnston has flashed a little bit. At least I can see the, traits. Similar thing with Jameson Williams. Like, you do see flashes, but Mingo has just been nothing out there. I mean, QJ,
I love that you just mentioned Quentin Johnston and Jameson Williams in the same sentence. That made me happy.
They've, kind of been the same freaking disappointment. So I get it. But even like watching QJ last week, I mean, you got to be pretty good to drop what would have been an 86-yard touchdown. So, I understand it doesn't sound great to say, but, he drew 3 defensive pass interference penalties throughout the game because even if the dude is still freaking raw out there, like, my goodness, man, just having that sort of this twitch in that size body, like, you see the problems. I just don't understand why he's been put into this, like, all right, try to stretch the field roll. Put Jalen Guyton out wide, tell him to run deep every fucking route of the game, and then for your little design touches underneath, that's where he should be getting QJ the ball. I mean, against the Bears, dude, like the first time they gave him a designed yak beater, he immediately breaks like 3 tackles and looks fantastic. I mean, we all saw the TCU Michigan game where the dude's running away from the entire defense. So, like, again, I feel like he hasn't quite been used right. Now, how long can we give
Guyton's back. No, Guyton's back. It's not a coincidence that he has his best game when Jalen Guyton's on the field.
That makes sense. I'm just, the only problem with QJ and Jameson, as much as I do see the flashes, the other side of the coin is how long can these guys have legit roles inside of really, really freaking good passing in games, do nothing, and then us, not give up on them. So, again, still, I like what I've seen out of them a little bit more than some of these other disappointments, because despite the disappointings, we do see signs of a better future, but clock is certainly ticking. I'll say that.
Cardinals are at the Texans this week. So it's Texans are only a 4-point favorite. It's a 47.5 point total. That is just a wrong point total. Okay, I've had a few of these games in these betting lines throughout the year where I'm just like, that's just wrong, and I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to overthink it. Las Vegas is wrong. That should be 50. When I was thinking about what that line would be, I was thinking 50, 51. 47.5 is just wrong. That is going to be a shootout.
That feels like a line that was more so set kind of based on what we've seen this year as opposed to what we should expect. I mean, I don't think there's any fucking lines above 50 right now. There haven't really been for a few weeks. Yeah, it's just the top line of the week, but I think because scoring in general has been down, we're getting this adjustment. So you'll see this, man. I think in the player prop market, some of the biggest advantages you can take some of the biggest disadvantages you can get is looking at player splits. You'll see a wide receiver's over under, just set at his receiving yards per game this year. And it's not accounting for, a change of quarterback or something like that underneath it. So that's what we have with Kyler, man. And honestly, just Stroud and company, now the kind of season-long advanced metrics are catching up, but just what they've done over the past few weeks, not even being at 100% has just been so wild. I mean, again, the first 5 weeks of the year, man, I remember counting the number of offensive linemen they had on IR, like in week 3 or 4, and it was insane. So shout out to all those dudes, for playing well despite it. But yeah, man, like that overcall. This Cardinals offense is suddenly looking pretty great. How quickly everyone seems to forget just how damn good Kyler is out there. Love seeing him healthy.
I'm happy to go under in a lot of games too. I'm not just Mr. Over guy. I mean, that's just an incorrect, inefficient line. That's just what it is. And looking at the wide receiver matchups, do you think that Quentin Johnston's going to see some Jaire Alexander this week?
I haven't been diving into since I've, moved on from my lovely former employer, PFF. I've been doing the shadow report stuff every week. So I'm not sure how much Jaire is doing it this year, but really took him a long time ever since Amari Cooper beat him like a drum about 4 years ago for Jaire to really start moving around again. So I don't think so, because if anything, it'll be probably Keenan Allen for some of the more high leverage snaps out there. So a little bit, but more than anything, man, like even when you do find the one-on-one shadow matchups, like we're talking about typical route rates of 50 to 70%. So still not in every snap thing, and it's not enough for me to be too overly concerned here. I mean, honestly, like Jaire didn't even play last week. We don't even know if he's going to be healthy. You wouldn't have known it because the Steelers passing game still couldn't do anything because Kenny Pickett is terrified to throw the football anywhere other than 2 yards downfield to a covered running back or whatever. So just completely horrendous last week, man. And I try not to do too much of the he should have thrown the ball here because of we don't know their progressions always. Like, I understand that, but man, just 3rd and 1, safety on the opposite hash. Deontay beats his man off the line of scrimmage, throws his hand up there, and to just see him, pretty much throw the ball into the dirt. I don't get it, man. Kenny Pickett, I mean, put the freaking nails in that coffin, that's for sure.
It's over. Kenny Pickett. Yeah, Kenny Pickett and Mac Jones are moving on. Sadly, as a fantasy football analyst, wrong about Kenny Pickett. And then just as a fan of the Patriots, growing up in Maine, had high hopes for Mac Jones. Sadly, that's not going to happen. And I have 10 burning questions for you. 10 burning questions coming up for Ian Hartitz after this. Oh, I see it every day online, every single day. Hey, that looks like a great fantasy team in an 8-team league. Oh, wish I could be in a league with you, right? Well, guess what? Now you can respond with, sure, let's play on Bettle. That's the beauty of this platform. This new Bettle platform standardizes all position scoring. So you just load your team and you challenge your friend, your colleague, Twitter troll, and you can browse other teams and issue challenges. Bettle is revolutionizing fantasy football. And with code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match plus a free $10. So even if you deposit $20, you get $50. Think about that. So go to Bettle.com. The code is Underworld. Bettle.com. The code is Underworld. Or click a link in the description. It's fun to be right. It is fun to be right.
It's true.
It is.
Very fun.
So let's be right about these burning questions that I have. Did Will Levis put up the fakest debut in NFL history?
Yeah, and it was apparent if you just freaking watched the game from the beginning, man. Missed OPI on one Hopkins touchdown, roasted, wide open, double move on the other one. He made some great throws out there. The one to Nick Westbrook-Ikini or Chris Moore, I always, get, who cares which one, really. But that was sick. But watch Jordan Love's game against the Steelers. You see, mediocre quarterbacks make at least 1 or 2 great throws all the time. Not fully on him necessarily. I don't think that Titans O-line has done anyone in that offense favors. And beyond Hopkins, who is he really throwing the football to? Chig Okonkwo let a potential touchdown hit him in the face mask last week. Missed on Chig this offseason. Hate to see that. So fakest debut, yeah. Is he doomed to be a good NFL quarterback? No, wouldn't say that. But man, when you throw 4 touchdowns out there, I'll call it the fakest.
He's probably going to be a Jordan Love, right?
That's fair.
Isn't that his destiny? Probably. I mean, I think that he has a higher ceiling. We haven't seen as much of him as we've seen of Jordan Love. Jordan Love has locked in the truth that he is an inaccurate quarterback. I think that,
but
right now you could say that Will Levis is inaccurate, but he has years ahead of him to develop. And the problem is Jordan Love was supposedly developing this accuracy and this feel for the game over the last 3 or 4 years behind Aaron Rodgers, and it just never happened.
And that's what makes it frustrating with Love in particular, because he's had all these years to learn the offense. So you would think that, the easier things would be easier. But it's also why I struggle to give up on some of these guys. I mean, fuck, man, even Zach Wilson out there, some of the arm talent throws that he makes, like, I'm just, again, we've seen so many starts. I'm 99% sure he's a bad quarterback. But guys like Wilson, like Levis, like Jordan Love, who for better and for worse, man, have the athleticism and the arm talent to force these defenses to defend every freaking blade of grass on the field. It's why guys like, Josh Allen, even before he became a world beater in real life, more games than not, I know I saw last night and the last few weeks as well. But like even 2018, 2019, those were still Bills offenses that could, move the ball with maybe not consistency, but they could at least flirt with high-end outcomes like Levis did in his first start, to be fair, because those quarterbacks are such game changers. So, I don't think I would like to think the days of, just the busts of, the absolute athletic, physical freak quarterbacks busting, like maybe those are going down now because, offensive play callers a little better. Who knows?
Was it the fakest get right game of all time, Geno Smith last week against Washington?
Yeah, in terms of like this Washington Commanders secondary, it's got to be the worst in the league. They play so much man coverage, which just was going hand in hand with it. Same time, man, like Geno throughout this year, he's still a top 10 QB, I believe, in completion percentage over expected. He's been dudding so much in fantasy because he fucked up his knee in like week 4 against the Giants. And he's been giving us nothing on the ground. Not that he was ever going to be this Lamar Jackson guy, but we kind of saw it last year with Justin Herbert as well. Like when you take away these quarterbacks that run for, 300 yards, 3 to 5 touchdowns, Joe Burrow last year versus, the first 4 weeks of this year, like your margin for error is so slim once you just become the true statue pocket passing quarterback that, for me, like that's why Geno deserved to be at the top of the tier in the offseason ahead of guys, or you could argue like, I think we usually gave Cousins and Goff a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but it was like Geno versus Rodgers versus Stafford versus, Purdy and maybe some of these other guys. I thought the Geno rushing floor was a decent enough tiebreaker in closer calls like that, but it just hasn't been there. So, Geno, certainly not someone flirting with that top 12 here when he's not facing the Commanders. Buccaneers, I think, would be the other get-right defense. Not for Will Levis, obviously, but 2 secondaries really want to target here. So, yeah, Geno, I don't think it's going to quite be there in the same way as last year. But, still to me, it's not him completely coming back, to being this bad quarterback. I just think he's more like middle tier than anything higher end.
As it turns out, when drafting a quarterback, either you drafted the first 2 or 3 quarterbacks off the board, draft a quarterback in round 3, or
wait till the end.
Don't draft a quarterback. You draft a quarterback at the very either your first or last. That's what you need to be drafting a quarterback this year.
Shout out Ricky Bobby.
If you ain't first, you're last. Now, late round quarterback options this year. Let's just go through them. CJ Stroud, ding, 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 ding. Sam Howell, ding, 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 ding. Gardner Minshew, ding, 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 ding. And now he'll never be as good as Stroud as a late round quarterback, but Josh Dobbs.
Oh my God, dude.
Josh Dobbs is who you want. You don't want Stafford. You don't want these. You want Josh Dobbs.
Man, even like Jordan Love, QB 26. I know he's been more up and down recently, but this dude was like a top 10 fantasy QB for the first, 4 or 5 weeks of the year. So no, they're not all hits. If you took Mac Jones or Bryce Young or Kenny Pickett, you're not feeling as good about life or anything.
But you just pivot. That's the point. You just pivot.
You didn't
late
use a high
quarterback
enough
is back, baby. I heard 0 RB was dead. I heard late round quarterback was dead. They're both back.
Especially, man, I think the common denominator with, a lot of these guys, even Stroud, definitely Howell and what he did that last year at, North Carolina. Minshew, that's obviously having Richardson go down. Couldn't have anticipated that, but we've still seen some decent enough evidence of him in Jacksonville. Spot start against the Cowboys last year. No, he didn't do it. Dobbs, at least once he was out there. Like I remember talking to Dwayne, week 2 or 3, where it's like, looking at Dobbs and it's like, if you just removed the name and kind of looked at this quarterback with the dual threat ability and just the throws he was making, man, against even good defenses. Man, dude's absolutely crushing it. So I'm with you, man. Late round QB back. And I think it also comes down to trying to find these offenses that are willing to, maybe surround them with a little bit of help, especially in Sam Howell's case. So all good things, man. How sold are you on Howell, like for the future? Because he makes his big time throw mixtape, man, is up there with any quarterback in the league. And he takes a lot of sacks, but he has actually been correcting that. So I do wonder if, fix up the O-line just a little bit, don't have the league's worst defense on the other side of the football. Buying Sam Howell?
Part of Sam Howell's appeal is the league worst defense.
That's true.
Part of his appeal is that he has great weapons. I mean, De'Ami Brown as your number 4 receiver, that's good.
That'll work.
Right? You have incredible versatility with
Even Pringle as your 5,
You've
man.
got a proper alpha in Terry McLaurin. You've got a dual threat running back in Antonio Gibson. So he's always playing from behind with great weapons, and that's going to lead to quality fantasy performances. I don't have a lot of good comps for him. It's not like I'm going to call him Drew Brees. I mean, he's undersized. He's got a very Baker Mayfield style of play.
Jeff Garcia, how about that?
Right. I think that's a great comp. I think you can go back to Jeff Garcia. That's the type of quarterback this is. This is not top 10 fantasy quarterback, but this is a guy every year. He's 10 to 15 every year. Yeah. Because most years he's not going to have this worst secondary in the league, in all this garbage time. On a league average team, in a league average situation, then he's like a QB 14 player. Yeah. And actually, after this year, I think that for that reason, he would be a dynasty sell. Not that I don't believe in him. I think he's going to be a starter for many years. But again, most quarterbacks end up being Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, once upon a time, was a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. And most of them sort of end up on that track eventually, or they enter the God tier. So they have 2 ways you can go. Now, another quarterback we talked about, who I think is entering the God of God tiers, because really 2 God tiers of quarterback, right? You've got the Joe Burrow tier, and you've got the Patrick Mahomes tier, right? And the
right.
Jalen Hurts tier. So I think that we could say now, CJ Stroud surpassing Herbert, surpassing Burrow. It's now time to talk about when is he going to surpass Mahomes? When is he going to surpass Jalen Hurts, if ever? It's going to be tough to overcome Hurts and Allen with their mobility, but Mahomes is 28, Stroud's 22, and they have the exact same fantasy points per game. They're both 19.9 fantasy points per game.
I think he is right next to Joe Burrow in the next tier of quarterbacks. I'm with you. I think he's past Herbert. T-Law, get the hell out of here at this point.
Oh,
man.
God.
I would say Lamar deserves to be in that, even if he's the 1D.
No, Lamar's in that. Lamar's in the first God tier, and then there's a God of God tiers. But now that we're talking about Stroud putting up 500 yards a game and being one of the best, if not the best, rookie quarterback of all time. Not for fantasy necessarily, because surpassing Cam Newton is going to be, but for a real life
passing yards
NFL quarterback,
it is
for all time. CJ Stroud is getting into that zone.
And I don't think it's going anywhere, man. If anything, they're getting healthier. Again, across the O-line, Nico hopefully will be back soon. Haven't seen too much on his toe issue. But, yeah, man, so again, in fantasy, I think he's going to be held back a little bit by the rushing. But it's not to say that he can't do it, which, I think we did see at Ohio State. We referenced the Northwestern game where it was terrible weather. Obviously, the Georgia performance was incredible. And
did you see that the halfback pitch back to him for a first down that happened a couple weeks ago?
I still don't know if that was actually designed or if
I don't think it was designed. I heard it. Apparently, it was not designed, but I'll tell you, it looked designed.
Dude, and even I remember week 1 against the Ravens, they scored 6 or 9 points, but they were still I almost did one of those, all 22 NFL primetime music tweets I like to send out. But I almost just did it on Stroud. Yeah, it just makes any piece of video, any part of life better. Listen to NFL primetime music. But Stroud from week 1 on, man, it's like he just, because I've seen Lance Zierlein and Daniel Jeremiah and some of these top tier mock draft guys and just evaluators talking about it too. And I watched every single game Stroud played at Ohio State. He was a very different quarterback for the majority of his career. Then we saw in the Georgia game. And then it's like he just played the Georgia game. It's like, all right, this is who I am now every single week. No problem. Like, you guys need me to create out of structure when everything's not perfect. Yeah, I can do that. Didn't have to do that because I was throwing the ball to, one incredible first round wide receiver after another. But it's there and it's on display. And honestly, I shout out to Benjamin Solak at the Ringer. I was reading his article. Maybe no, Stephen Ruiz. Both of them are fantastic. But I think it was Stephen's article. And he was talking about how like Stroud has reached a top speed with the ball in his hand, like just off of like Anthony Richardson, just behind him. Stroud might be like a 4-5 quarterback, man. He's running away from defenders like he is out there. So he didn't do any athletic testing at Ohio State. But when you consider that element of it, maybe he could become, a quarterback where, no, not Hurts or Josh Allen level. But if CJ Stroud had a season where he, runs for 300, 350 yards and scores 5 touchdowns, I think it's on the table for him, man. It's what guys like Herbert and guys like Burrow have done to get close to that God tier of quarterbacks. So not quite at the God tiers, but I'm not counting them out from joining them at some point is what I'm saying.
So 500 yards in a season divided by 17 games, right? That's easy to get to. That's not hard. Yeah. Why can't he get to that? Doesn't sound, that's 30 yards a game. He can rush for 30 yards a game.
I mean, he's never done it yet, but I think he could.
I think he can. I think he absolutely can. He certainly has the athleticism, the ability from the flashes that we've seen. Unfortunately, they're going to upgrade the running game eventually, and then that's going to lead to even less incentive for him to run the ball. They haven't called design runs for him, just like they did not do that at Ohio State because he's too valuable as a passer. Should we keep the light on, though, for Dameon Pierce? Talk about unlucky. If you knew before the season started this offense was going to be this in Houston, Dameon Pierce would have been third rounder.
I was just going to say
third fantasy drafts. Yeah.
Same thing with we were just talking about Washington and Sam Howell. Like if you knew how like his yardage and touchdown pace, like Jahan Dotson would have been right up. Terry McLaurin would have been, third round pick as well. Like funny how some of these things work out, but man. So the thing with Pierce, I will give it okay, Singletary was great last week, but that was the first time pretty much all season that anybody has looked good in this Houston Texans run game. And that has included Devin Singletary. So this is more of a situation where Pierce and Singletary were sucking. So it kind of brings me back to the Rachaad White example from last year. Where when you look at these rushing offenses and nobody is outperforming anybody, that's when I am more going to kind of keep that light on. That said, man, it's not like things are moving in a positive direction. I mean, Singletary someone that went out there, only got a 1 year, $2 million contract. Not like they were heavily invested in him, but guess what? New franchise, new leaders and everything going on that didn't even use that 4th round pick on Dameon Pierce in the first place. And they have no idea about how good his, missed tackles force were back in 2022 and all that. So, light on, fine. Am I going out of my way to get Dameon Pierce or expecting him to all of a sudden become this, bell cow RB1? No, because at the end of the day, looking at it, 5 or 6 year sample size going back to college, all but one of those years the coaching staff has told us they don't trust him to be that every down workhorse. That more times than not, we need a running back to be to really boom in fantasy land.
I'm keeping the light on. And I don't even like him, right? I find myself time and time again acquiring these players that I don't even like because the fantasy public is so fickle. And they're so ready to move on from guys they loved 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm sitting here going, well, fundamentally, I like him more now because he's on a team that scores a lot of touchdowns. This is great. They're a guard away. If they draft a Robert Hunt type guard in the 2nd round next year, everything changes. So
but
that's all we need.
Yeah, I feel like it could be more likely we're going to see, running back on that team needs. And do they need a running back? No, of course not. Look how many points they're scoring right now. But I just don't have the confidence in Pierce based on how he performed this year and based on how they used him before he even got injured that he's even going to be the RB1 on this team next year. So I hear you. Price is right, then price is right.
Price is right. Again, no guarantees. That's why he's so inexpensive. That's why this is a distressed asset, Ian. This is what I call distressed asset.
Yeah, so, I don't like being the guy that's just like, oh, yeah, I have value. Everyone's fine and dandy. So I'll give you a hard no. I don't think Pierce is going to work out from that perspective, but I don't think you're a complete idiot for going that way.
That was a great non-answer. I love that. I love you played the whole room there. right? The whole field. You got everything covered. All your bases covered. So just for the record, this should be it's a very easy question, right? Who's the best team in the AFC South?
Houston Texans.
It is. It is the Houston Texans. They're only getting better. That's what I'm saying. They add a corner. They add a guard. So this becomes an unstoppable team. Like, they're closer to a Super Bowl than Jacksonville is. They're fewer pieces away. Think about that. Because they have both a left tackle and a right tackle. They have edge rushers. They have valuable pieces that are difficult to acquire already. They just need to fill out the rest of it. They just need to color in the canvas. I'm excited.
It's one of these things with Jacksonville where, like, you look at their roster and you just can't figure out why they're not better. Like, how is this team with Josh Allen, with Walker, how are they 25th in pressure rate this year? And they had a couple week stretch where they were starting to get things going, just like Trevor Lawrence. Every single time, he has a bad game, he'll come back and he'll put the performance, together to make you think, shout out Nick Wright, that he is the prince who was promised and all that stuff going on there. So, like, with T-Law, man, again, I don't think they're a terrible football team. I mean, even if you are underperforming, you're 6-3, guess what? Good football teams should be able to overcome some of that. But man, it's not like we're questioning, like, are there enough weapons in Jacksonville? There are. They're good. And when you look at these Lawrence numbers, man, talk about, number one overall picks getting, just a longer leash and everything. Same yards per attempt this year as Tannehill and Desmond Ridder.
Oh,
his passer rating is lower than Derek Carr.
Oh,
completion rate over expected. Yeah, Baker Mayfield's been better this year. So, hey, I've watched it. The amount, if this was a college offense where their wide receivers got credit for just getting 1 foot in bounds, like T-Law would have an extra 5 or 6 touchdowns this year. But even with the statistics where we're attempting to give some sort of context to that, things like, PFF passing grade and the completion percentage over expected, you're still seeing a pretty damn mid quarterback out there, man. So again, underperforming on offense, underperforming on defense. I'll take the Texans team that, in addition to, again, having this, far more explosive passing game, I was one of the many questioning the decision to move up, and take Will Anderson at number 3 after.
Well, that was a terrible move.
Sure. But it's, the defense looks good regardless of how they got there. DeMeco Ryans just has these dudes playing hard as hell. So yeah, terrible move. Sure. Not saying the performance this year all of a sudden makes that decision right. But the defense, man, that's the other thing. As much as we want to just give Stroud and everyone their flowers, man, that defense doing what they did to Joe Burrow, forcing him into some of those terrible decisions, man. Got to give them some credit too.
You do. And they're very fortunate that their record is going to be so good that they're not going to regret that pick as much as if their record was.
God, if that
right, if they were as bad as their projected win total this year, then giving up that pick was a huge mistake. And this week, Jaguars, they got to crush the Titans. Yeah. They've got to crush the Titans this week. This is a big week for them. This is a super indicative week, a bellwether week for Jacksonville. You got to watch and see what they do against the Titans. And as a rule, if a guy moves up from the consensus number 5 overall pick, according to mock drafters, to number 1 in the last 48 hours before the draft starts, like Trayvon Walker did, fade.
Yeah.
Fade. Anytime you have the last minute move up of a guy.
That happened with Baker too, I think, right?
Right. Anytime you get the last minute move up, where the guy moves up from 5 to 1 in the 48 hours leading up to the draft, fade. They could have just taken the chalk move. Aiden Hutchinson would have been the chalk move. You go to chalk there. You don't get creative with that. It's always a mistake. Always a mistake.
Hutchinson is so good.
Yeah, but you can trade up and it end up not totally destroying your team because the guy you get is so good, or the pick you give up is actually worse than it was projected to be. Olave, right? The Saints traded a first rounder, right? And to move up to get Olave, which was a bad move, right? That was a very, very bad move to trade up for Olave. That's what the Saints do. They do not treat their picks with enough value, right? They're constantly selling tomorrow for, mediocrity today. And if you're Olave, you have to be very happy about Jameis Winston. So he splits with Jameis Winston last week. Most of his yards came with Winston. And if we are looking for a streamer, Winston is that guy. Winston has the weapons. If you have Rashid Shaheed, if you have Chris Olave, these are some of the best deep weapons. I mean, between just Olave and Shaheed, I would challenge you to go around the league. Yeah, of course, Waddle, Hill, but there aren't that many better dual deep threats on a roster than Olave and Shaheed. Jameis Winston becomes the best option for streaming quarterbacks now that Dobbs is rostered in 50+% of leagues. And Olave is going to have a great second half. I'm excited for Olave with the second half with Winston.
For sure. And happy shout out Shaheed too, man. Just looking at what he can do both as a deep threat. I mean, his double move mixtape over the past 2 years is up there with anyone out there. And yeah, I know he's getting left one-on-one, but guess what? He's winning those matchups like a really good receiver should do when they're left one-on-one. And also just, the ability with the ball in his hands. I remember last year he had this like fly sweep for a tud against the Bengals. And it was like, oh, okay, this dude's got some moves in the open field. He's returning punts for touchdowns, this year. Like that dude is an absolute baller. And, lest we forget, I mean, I know they do have this week 11 bye to get right, but Michael Thomas did suffer that knee injury. So we could actually get this even more condensed. Because, I mean, that has been the one kind of issue.
Yeah, go ahead. Whoa. A.T. Perry.
A.T. Perry.
A.T. Perry.
That apparently has got Jameis's trust because that touchdown he scored last week was one of the most ill-advised, like arguably like next to like a Jameis YOLO ball. Like you should probably show that play just back across the field. Had no business doing it, but made the contested catch, got the opportunity. And that is why Jameis is going to be such a godsend for this whole offense. So I don't know. I mean, will they let him go full Jameis? God forbid they just start leaning a little bit more into the Taysom experience. That is what worries me, to an extent right there. But moving Michael Thomas potentially for your guy, A.T. Perry, maybe he keeps doing his thing. But I would assume that Perry isn't going to get as many targets as Michael Thomas would otherwise. So both a quarterback upgrade in fantasy land going from Carr presumably to Jameis. We'll see, how long it takes for the shoulder to heal. And then also the condensed target share. Yeah, man. I think Olave, last week he still led the NFL in unrealized air yards. But, as we saw, catching some of them this time around too.
It is He was leading the league in unrealized air yards without Winston as his quarterback. Now he gets Winston. If he's going for the unrealized air yards record, this is best case scenario for Chris Olave, but it's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Garrett Wilson's like, man, I'm so jealous of my ex-teammate, Chris Olave. I've just been, getting by, just grinding it out with Zach Wilson. I mean, I think Garrett Wilson, if I had to do a comp for Garrett Wilson, be explosive DeAndre Hopkins, because we haven't seen the Tom Savage corollary. We talked about the Alfred Morris corollary. I have another corollary, the Tom Savage corollary, where no matter how bad the quarterback gets, the number one wide receiver gets fed, and that's what we're seeing in New York with Garrett Wilson. And for that reason, I think he's explosive DeAndre Hopkins.
I'm cool with that comp, man. I mean, I was just looking at it now, last 4 weeks, 12, 13, 14 targets. I mean, I know it wasn't ideal early on, but that's the thing with, these Jets teams. I know they've scored, one touchdown in the last 3 weeks, which, yeah, it'd be a lot cooler if that was higher and everything. But, they are just force-feeding Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And from that perspective, hard to overly fault them there. So, yeah, man, Garrett looking like over the last, has a bye week in there, so it's skewing it. But yeah, man, really back up there as a weekly upside wide receiver too, which is all you can ask for. So personally, man, like we talk about, like if we would have known what we knew now, like if we knew Garrett was like just this good and like demanding this many targets, and we didn't know like Roch, he was already, a top 8 wide receiver, but like, my God, I would have been fine putting this dude in the top 5 or so, I think, at that point. So for me, I mean, Garrett,
what are you going to do, Ian? You got to put him ahead of CeeDee Lamb? You got to put him ahead of A.J. Brown? I know how much you love A.J. Brown. You're going to put him ahead of the Sun God? What are you going to do? You couldn't lose in the first round if you're drafting wide receiver.
Jeez. That's so true, man.
It's so true. I mean, that's the God tier of wide receiver. That's the sub-God tier of wide receiver, because the God tier, right, is Chase Jefferson.
Yeah.
Right? That's the God tier. And then the God tier is this next tier of group of wide receivers, the A.J. Browns, the C.D. Lambs for Dynasty. So I like to think of it like a peloton of, you have a pack of wide receivers, A.J. Brown, C.D. Lamb, Amon-Ra, chasing Jefferson. Right? How do you rank those guys? You have Brown, you have Lamb, you have Amon-Ra, chasing Jefferson and Chase in Dynasty. Give me your top 5 Dynasty wide receivers.
Jefferson, Chase, top 2, no surprise. And then among those next 3, I'm going to go, I'll give CD the wide receiver 3 spot a little bit more respect just for having done it, even though I think he's just as good as Garrett. I'll put Garrett number 4. I think
you put
point,
Garrett Wilson over Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I think Garrett's not significantly better in real life, but I do think if there was one wide receiver up here who's, and look, Amon-Ra St. Brown's great, but like, I'm not sure if he is like a top, if you had to pick like your number 1 wide receiver, like in a Madden draft, I'm not sure if he goes top 15. I think he is in the absolute perfect situation. Real life. Fantasy, I get it. He puts up these numbers, man. But this Lions offense, man, they're continuing to get by.
Stop it. What does he have to do? He's Jerry Rice.
Oh, please.
What are you talking about?
Just among these guys, which again, we're talking about.
You're holding his size and athleticism against him at this point. What does this guy have? What does this man have to do?
It's versus Garrett Wilson and CD Lamb and AJ. And I'll put Amon-Ra ahead of AJ Brown because the age difference and fantasy land. But no, in terms of like who do you think's the better real life wide receiver? Amon-Ra St. Brown or Amari Cooper? I think Cooper is better in real life. Obviously, we're not putting him ahead of him in fantasy land.
What?
Like you don't
Amari Cooper? Brown?
Yeah, he's putting up ridiculous numbers every time Watson's there. His route running seems, I think Amari Cooper's a better real life receiver than the Sun God, who's getting peppered inside of an offense with nowhere else to go with the ball. That is one of the best designed offenses in the entire NFL. And that's Jared Goff putting the ball right where it needs to be every time. Sun God deserves a lot of credit. I think he'd be a wide receiver 1 on over half the league.
We are going to have to reconvene next year. Same bat time, same bat channel. Mind of Mansion, Ian Hartitz, Fantasy Life, Player Profiler. We're going to talk about the Sun God at this time next year. The question is, how many years does he have to keep piling up before eventually it's not the system, it's not the coach, it's not the quarterback, it's the superstar, the Sun God? We'll find out. We're going to find out together. But you compared him to Amari Cooper, and I don't think that he would appreciate that very much. He has the checklist of all the wide receivers like De'Ami Brown that were drafted ahead of him. And
so
he looks at that list every single day and crosses those guys' names off the list every single day when he wakes up.
I think the career trajectory we're looking at for Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean this as someone who else was a really good player, but not Jerry Rice good. I think we're just looking at Jarvis Landry, the clear-cut number 1, a good receiver, a good quality receiver, man, who can be great when you force feed them 150-plus targets. But if we actually look at these guys, if we're playing backyard football and saying who's the best, I think Amon-Ra is the more overrated fantasy star who is, just not quite as good in real life. Were you not a Jarvis guy? Did that hit you especially deep?
That's all fine. It's fine. It's
a good comp.
We agree to disagree. We're at an impasse because we're speaking completely different languages, right? You're talking about muscle cars. I'm talking about airplanes. We're talking about different things. We're at an impasse. We're going to talk in a year. Okay. We're going to talk a year. We're going to talk in a year. I remember once upon a time, Keenan Allen was just dismissed as never being able to be a Mike Evans level receiver because he's not an alpha. He's more of a possession receiver, but he just commands all these targets. He's so peppered with targets. Where Mike Evans, he's going down the field. Has more tiptoe.
But Evans has
catches.
had the better career. Evans has been the better receiver than Keenan Allen. It's not by an ocean, but
oh no, I know, and I'm only saying that because I'm setting up a question.
Okay,
it's on the show sheet. In that this year, it's been quietly a year of older receivers.
There we go.
Diggs, right? Older. Cooper Kupp, when healthy, has been productive generally most weeks, right? Then you've got Keenan Allen, which I thought was expected that he would be this good because we just thought remember, don't forget, Kellen Moore. It's Kellen Moore, right? So you were right about that. All the Kellen Moore fans that were drafting Keenan Allen, you were right. You were right. But Mike Evans, man. Mike Evans, not dead yet. What a statement season from him that I am here. I'm still standing. I'm still strong.
It could be even bigger, man. Like the crazy part with Evans this year, like he's pacing for bigger numbers than he has ever put up with Brady, which I know Baker's, zeroing in the targets a little more, but you would have just figured that Evans is putting up these numbers, in spite of Baker. Just having watched these guys, man, like Baker has missed Godwin on like 3 or 4 touchdowns this year. Like that's the guy who should be crying about the Baker experience. Evans on the other side of things is usually the one actually dropping a couple of touchdowns. So there has been meat left on the bone that's been available for Evans. And look, you'll take the drop here and there because then you'll get the touchdown he had last week where he freaking drags a couple professional athletes 5 yards into the end zone. So absolute beast. But this is, again, something that's, Adam Thielen out there as well. Like, my goodness, like we are looking at historical shit here with these
old receiver
plus wide receivers, man.
Cooper Kupp, was the year to draft old dudes.
Tyreek's getting up there, man. You wouldn't know it. Look at the production. But dude, like, again, I did a whole article coming this year thinking I was gonna, fade a lot of these guys and be right for doing it because over the past 10 years, man, 11 individual wide receivers have posted top 12 numbers, like after leaving their 20s behind. And Larry Fitzgerald and Julian Edelman were, two of those guys that were only basically doing it in multiple seasons. So Stephon Diggs is another one that looks absolutely fine, man. So it was one of these things where like, what old receiver has like fallen off a cliff? Just kind of.
Well, Mike Williams got injured.
Yeah, but he looked like he was about to blow the hell up, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that sucks.
They've all been good. It's been amazing to watch. It's been truly. Adam Thielen.
Yeah, like no.
As a wide receiver, a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy, Adam Thielen.
Devontae Adams has been the bust, but obviously that's factors not really under his control. We all saw the last Jimmy G game where we're talking about 150 yards and 2 touchdowns added to the stat line if we just had something close to competent quarterback play. So Hopkins, like that's another guy where he looks fine out there. We can talk about
he's not getting the volume. Oh, excuse me. Adam Thielen's the wide receiver 13. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Even, I'm looking at like ADP right now. Like Ridley, he's not that old, kind of a different situation coming back. Like,
it really doesn't count.
There hasn't been a
said Amari Cooper's been good.
Yeah. There has not been a highly drafted, like true veteran receiver that has just disappointed because they're no longer good at football. And that's amazing.
It is. It's amazing. We talked about Cooper Kupp. I think that quietly, this is a big week for Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua cannot just continue to stack up these duds. He has to remind people that he's capable of commanding 10 targets and putting up 20-plus fantasy points. It's a big week, Seattle. It's a big week. They're expecting a lot from Puka Nacua. A lot of people are going to be starting him in fantasy.
I know it's been annoying. Again, if you zoom out a little bit, though, throw out the freaking trash we had to deal with without Stafford before the bye. Really tough against the Cowboys. It's a big week, but we see Stafford go out there and look healthy and everything, and Puka just happens to be on the wrong side of this Kupp versus Puka, threshold they have going on. Do I think Puka is going to be putting up those again? first 6 weeks, wide receiver 1 numbers the rest of the way. No, I thought it was reasonable to downgrade him into more of a mid-tier wide receiver 2 with Kupp. But hey, guess what? He hasn't even hitting those, mid-tier wide receiver 2 numbers. So Seahawks, with Witherspoon and some of the upgrades they've made on defense, not exactly, just the biggest smash spot in the world, but healthy Stafford with a Rams defense that obviously isn't anything to write home about. Hopefully we get another shootout going on with these Seahawks. So I'm with you, but I'm fine betting on Puka.
You betting on Ty Chandler?
It's like, how many guys do we need to get injured for him to come on in at this point? So this week, yeah, sure. I'll bet on almost any running back getting 20 plus touches inside of an offense that doesn't completely suck. But, I don't think they trade for Cam Akers. I don't think someone like Alexander Madison, would be keeping Ty Chandler completely on the bench if he was this absolute world beating talent. So he looked good last week, had that nice 29-yard touchdown run nullified on a hold and everything. Explosive guy, had a good preseason. But again, we've seen
Sunday Night Football.
We've seen Zonovan
at Denver
fucking night be a fantasy relevant player. Dearness Johnson was a must-start RB for a couple of weeks, like in actual like modern times. So could Ty Chandler be something? Sure, but it's Ty Chandler.
He's a must-start this week.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, exactly. Like, sure.
He's a must-start this week. Get excited, Ian.
How high are you going with him? Like probably like RB 15, 16? That's exciting.
Yeah,
sure.
That's a big deal. This guy
I should be more excited.
He's an electric receiver. He runs a 4.37. I get that they just don't respect these guys. You talked about this earlier, that had the day 3 draft capital. Think about Aaron Jones. How many years did it take Aaron Jones to finally get the respect he deserved in Green Bay? If they can go get the guy they know from the last team they coached at, who's available for a 7th rounder, like a conditional pick,
Chandler's
they're going to go do it.
He's not even my favorite healthy running back on Minnesota right now.
Who's your favorite healthy running back?
Let's get one of the best kick returners in the game, the football. How many times is Minnesota going to keep messing this up? First, my guy CPAT, now Kene Nwanu can't get more than a few touches over the course of a season. Come on.
Get Nwanu in there. Good. That's a good truther. You're a truther on Nwanu. I love it. If a running back is 210 with speed, I like him too. Okay, bold prediction, but I'm going to give you some guidance on this bold prediction. Bold prediction. Who are the top 3 picks in the NFL draft in 2024?
Teams and players. I'm going to go. I think the Giants earned the number 1 pick, just continue to free fall with the Tommy DeVito experience. I'm going to say they trade all that in a windfall to the Buccaneers, who take Caleb. Number 2, the Patriots stand pat. Patriots get the number 2 pick because they fucking suck right now.
Yeah, here we go.
Drake May, number 2. Number 3 will be the Bears via the Panthers, not their own pick. And they will see enough out of Justin Fields, just like he was shown before he got injured, just like he was starting to prove everyone wrong.
Okay, big second half coming for Justin Fields.
Big second half coming, and they reunite him. Not reunite him because they didn't quite play together. But Marvin Harrison Jr., you are a Chicago Bear. Come on down.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.